We are live.
Good morning. I'm Antoinette Mosley, the Chair of the Housing and Community Development Committee, and I'd like to welcome you to the December 16, 2025 remote meeting. All council members and staff are participating virtually. And for those of you out there with us today, welcome. To help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud. We're streaming live on our Virtual Engagement Hub, which is accessible through the Virtual Engagement Hub link on the front page of the city website. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone by calling 855-925-2801 and using the meeting code 9791. Again, for those of you out there with us today, welcome. And for today's meeting, we have the option for people to call in and comment live during the meeting. To call in and comment live, use the same number, 855-925-2801. Meeting code is 9791. Your phone will be muted and you will hear the meeting live. And at this point, speakers will need to push *3 to enter the speaker queue. I'll now go through and introduce all committee members and staff who are participating virtually. Council and staff, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
Interim City Manager Ben Woody.
Good morning.
Deputy City Attorney Janice Ashley.
Good morning. I'm sorry I'm off camera. I'll join you in a minute.
That's just fine. Community Economic Development Director Nikki Reed.
Good morning.
And CDBG-DR Program Manager Elma King.
Good morning.
And also welcome to any and all additional staff and participants. We'll move forward, but I do have a quick question for you, Katie. Are there any speakers in the queue at this particular point?
One moment. Let me just reload and double check. No, Vice Mayor. We do not have anyone in the speaker queue.
Okay, thank you for that. Since there are no speakers, we'll move forward with the first item on our agenda, which is the approval of the minutes from the November 18th, 2025 meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Councilwoman Smith,
Aye.
Councilwoman Turner,
Aye.
myself, aye. The motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the second item on our agenda, that is the CDBG-DR Housing Program update. And we'll hear from Nikki and Elma, and this is an information sharing opportunity. Nikki, I'll hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. We're happy to be here today. We wanted to really reflect on some of the conversation that we had at the Housing Recovery Board when we had shared some information about our CDBG-DR housing programs. And so with that, I'll ask Elma to kick us off, really do an overview of some of the items that we're working through with right now. And then at the end, we'll have a conversation here with the HCD committee about some next steps. So Elma, why don't you get us started? Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki and Katie, for handling the slides. As you all are likely very familiar, the city's CDBG-DR action plan allocated $31 million to the CDBG-DR housing programs, inclusive of $3 million for the single-family home repair program and $28 million for the affordable multifamily construction program. The state of North Carolina is administering the single-family home repair program via the Renew NC program, which is live and accepting applications right now, on behalf of the city of Asheville at no administrative cost to the city. So the city being responsible for only the hard construction costs. The Renew NC program has seen strong demand and higher than anticipated costs, costs higher than initially estimated, and staff are exploring solutions to address the housing repair needs balanced with the multifamily construction program needs, and we are gathering data to inform decisions. As Nikki mentioned just a minute ago, based on Recovery Board feedback, on December 3rd, we're collecting additional data to inform our decision making. And we'll be bringing this item back for discussion with you all on January 20th and with the Housing Recovery Board on February 4th. Next slide, please, Katie. The proposed amendment, I'll go into the details of that. If we go to the next slide, These are our current program allocations as summarized in the key takeaway slide. 28 million for the multifamily program and 3 million for the single family repair program, for a total of 31 million in our housing bucket for CDBGDR. I do want to just share one piece, which is that the unmet needs assessment indicated that we had a $33 million need in the housing category, and our $31 million allocation in the action plan was in direct response to trying to address that. Yes, Vice Mayor?
Sorry, I was just wondering when you brought up the unmet need, did
Mm.
it go into the types of unmet need? Did it say we would need so much for single family and so much for multifamily?
This I can respond to you about after. I don't have the details of
Okay.
that
Okay.
on hand.
Okay. Thanks. Go right ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. And I just want to share too that that was I bring that up because in general the unmet need was calculated at 1.1 billion, and then our allocation at 225 million results in just some really challenging decisions. So that's an excellent question that I'd love to follow up with you about, but that's sort of the context for why I bring up that piece. Next slide, please, Katie. So a little bit more detail about the Renew NC program is shared here, in that it's a centralized housing rehabilitation and reconstruction or replacement program prioritizing low to moderate income families, particularly with residents who are seniors, age 62 or older, children, or disabled individuals in the household. And the Renew NC program covers 29 counties that were impacted by Tropical Storm Helene. So this includes single family and manufactured homes. It must be the resident's primary residence. And eligible homeowners who are awarded the grant are expected to remain in the home for 3 years. And I'll just share too that we are prioritizing the Renew NC program prioritizes households at 60% AMI or less first before moving on to other income categories. Next slide, please, Katie. Thank you. So as mentioned, the city had allocated $3 million to reimburse the state for hard construction costs, with the state administering the assistance to beneficiaries, and then the city will reimbursing the state for eligible hard construction costs, reviewing and verifying reimbursement requests, and monitoring the state to ensure program compliance as the state does the day-to-day program operations. Next slide, please. So what we're seeing is that we're seeing a significant funding gap. The city initially estimated that we would need $3 million to cover the damage, and the state program requires reconstruction of up to $450,000 per unit if repair costs exceed a $50,000 threshold. So just to clarify, it can be considered rehabilitation up to $50,000. And once it kicks up beyond that $50,000, once the damage assessment is considered greater than $50,000 to repair, then it goes into the reconstruction category with a maximum of $450,000. And so based on current applications, and we're estimating at the moment, the current gap is at least $12 million, reflecting again the additional demand than expected and the higher than anticipated costs. The application window does close on December 31st, and there's a 60-day application processing period, so we anticipate knowing more in March after all the applications are processed. And I can give you a view of what the current applications are looking like on the next slide. Oh, yes, Councilwoman Turner?
I just want to make sure I understand how we estimated the 12 million. So are we just saying, because if the applications just aren't even closed, how do we know it's that much? We're saying it could be as much as 450,000 per X amount of units.
Yeah, so we're taking a $250,000 average per home,
Oh,
understanding
average,
that
okay.
some could be 50,000 reconstruction, rehabilitation, some could be up to that 450. So we're doing an average of 250, and that's sort of the guidance that the state had initially provided. That could be a rough estimate, and then using the applications received and eligible to date to calculate.
That might be helpful on here, the average number.
To hear the average numbers, yes. And so there's the average number across the board when we don't know if it's rehabilitation or reconstruction. And then if it is a reconstruction, we were told that 375 is a viable proxy for not having the data yet, or reconstruction average alone.
That's helpful. Thanks. I'm just trying to follow along. Thank you.
Of course, yeah. Councilwoman Mosley?
Yeah, a couple of questions. In the earlier slide, it indicated that prioritization would be given to folks below a certain income level, children, and disabled. When we say disabled, is that someone who necessarily is receiving disability insurance benefits, or is that someone who, I don't know, has a placard, a handicap placard for a car? That's one. Secondly, I wonder what happens in the off chance that the cost for reconstruction for one home exceeds $450,000. Does that mean that applicant is excluded, or does that mean that applicant would need to come up with other funding for anything in excess of 450?
Great questions, both of them. For the first one, to be considered a household with a disabled household member, a verification of a disability form must be completed, and it requires a documented disability either through and there are a number of things required. It could be a visible disability, such as they are wheelchair bound, receipt of federal disability benefits as documented by their Social Security disability benefits, um, and then certification from a medical professional, or actually, you're right, presentation of a government issued disability placard would also constitute this, and also the North Carolina homestead exemption, which shows that the applicant is disabled. Those are the 5 applicable methods for documenting disability.
Can
And
those
then
be above the income level? Say if you're disabled, but you're 100% AMI, do you still qualify for this? No?
you would qualify, but we would prioritize the 60% first, and within the 60%, those with a resident that is either disabled, senior, or a child,
Thank you.
before we go to the other income levels. And then your second question.
It was about what if the
Exceeded.
reconstructions exceeded for some reason. I'm just thinking, it seems like everything is going up.
Yes.
Right. I'm
That's
just
an excellent question that I think we'll get back to you about after we check the Renew NC program manual on what occurs when the costs exceed that 450K threshold. Thank you. Did I see another hand? Okay. Next slide, please. This will give you an idea of the applications to date. This is from about a week ago, the 7th. But at the time, we have about 245 applications now, but at the time we had 238 applications. Of those, 83 were considered eligible. And then of the 83 considered eligible, if you look down at that bottom right table, you'll see the phase 1 priority one, or just the phase. So there are 57 which are in phase 1, which means there are 57 that are 60% AMI or less. Of those 57, then 38 are not just 60% AMI or less, but also with the resident that we described, a senior, a child, or a disabled individual. So we have the data on the applications that are considered eligible. We are getting data about some of what the damage assessments are leading to, but the state is being very cautious about the amount of damage assessments they're doing, because we've only been able to allocate $3 million to this program, and conducting the damage assessments leads to an expectation from residents that we will be able to complete the rehabilitation or reconstruction on their homes. So they've completed the damage assessment for those 38 in the phase 1 priority 1 category. And we have some general information about those. Any questions on the data available at the moment? We expect to have much more in March when the applications are completed, application processing is completed, excuse me, and and after the subrecipient agreement is completely finalized so that we can have the details behind the damage assessment figures property by property rather than utilizing average figures.
When you say you're gathering data for the next step, what does that mean? What type of data?
The kind of data we're hoping for is specific information on what the damage assessments are coming up with for each particular property. So how much of it is, of the rehabilitations, of those that are considered rehabilitations, are they $40,000? Are they $30,000? Of those that are reconstructions, are they 250 or 375? Like, so those assessments will help inform decision making.
Okay, thank you.
And what
Um,
constitutes then, what makes up the inactive number? What does that mean?
It's either individuals who are no longer who've decided to not participate in the program, and I believe in some cases they've been referred to other programs. That was referenced in a meeting just this week. That in some cases Renew NC is saying this might not be for us. Maybe you can go through another door, like the bond program that, for example, that is being conducted by the city. Which I believe Nikki can speak to a little bit more.
In the interim, well, Nikki, were you going to say anything? If not, I have another question. So I watched the housing recovery, and one of the speakers brought up a concern, and this is going to Shanika's question about inactive.
Mm-hmm.
What, say you're a homeowner who's going to need a rehab and you're 60% AMI. Presumably the rehab would require you to leave your home. Do we find that folks who can't afford to relocate are pulling themselves out of the program? Because my understanding is this program does not provide rental assistance.
That is correct that the Renew NC program does not provide temporary relocation assistance. We don't have verification that folks are opting out because of that, but it stands to reason that that would be the case because in cases of reconstruction, they would not be able to be present. So you're absolutely correct that that could be a deterrent and then a concern, especially at that income level. I see Nikki has.
I'll just add that I'm aware that some of the applicants that require rental assistance or need rental assistance in order to take advantage of this program, the state has referred some of them to the long-term recovery group, which has some available funding for rental assistance. I'm unclear about the details and or if that has been successful, but I'm aware that that is one opportunity that I know applicants have been referred to.
Because you know where I'm going with this. I'm trying to see if one of the unintended consequences is perhaps this program, for the rehab portion at least, ends up going to the folks with the highest incomes or the highest AMI. I'm just curious to see if that's where we might be headed with this. I don't know how you find that out, but I'm curious to know if you can.
I think we can try and find out a little bit more about those inactive applications from the state. And then the other piece of it is that we aren't in a position to move into future phases of, higher income levels until we've served everyone in the earlier phase. But to your point, if folks are opting out because it's just too much of a deterrent to be able to find a temporary,
And I'm sorry to keep
solution.
jumping in with questions at the time.
Yeah.
So say if you're someone who needs more than 50,000, but you have nowhere to go, can you still get 50,000 worth of repairs done? The answer is no, right?
No, if the damage assessment is considered that you need more than $50,000 of repair or rehabilitation, it gets immediately kicked up into the reconstruction.
Do we know, this is really in the weeds, but who does the assessments? Private contractors or part of the Renew NC program send somebody out?
The Renew NC program has hired private contractors.
So like professional estimators probably with their little books for this region. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you for your questions. Next slide. Thank you. Thank you, Katie. So many of the considerations that staff are thinking through are that we really want to fund the immediate needs of residents, and that we understand that given the current estimates, based on the information that we have, that 20 million will ensure that we can address the most exigent needs, prioritizing those households that we've talked through, earning 60% AMI or less, with children, elderly or disabled residents in the home. And that we estimate that approximately 80 homes would be repaired or fully reconstructed. This would allow for $11 million to remain in the multifamily housing allocation. And of course, there are other avenues for this as well, including the WNC Affordable Housing Loan Fund with Self-Help Credit Union and Dogwood, and then the Home ARP resources available for multifamily. And we do expect to have a fuller understanding of the need by March, again, given the application processing timelines and the fact that the application deadline closes December 31st. But with that, I think I have one more slide, and then I'm going to turn it over to Nikki so she can share what we heard from the Housing Recovery Board, which it sounds like, Vice Mayor, you've been pretty plugged into, and then what some of the considerations are after that. So what we're considering is shifting 17 million out of the multifamily housing program to address the needs in the single family housing program. Obviously retaining that $31 million housing program total, but with the reallocation resulting in 11 million remaining in the multifamily category. With that, I'll turn it over to Nikki on what we heard on December 3rd at the Housing Recovery Board.
Great. Thanks, Elma. Next slide, please, Katie. So the previous slides were effectively one half of the presentation that we shared with the Housing Recovery Board. We wanted to start with an overview of the entire CDBG-DR program and then drill down into this specific issue. So effectively, those slides were pretty much the same as what we had shared earlier. And these are the questions that we posed. We wanted to understand what questions and concerns should we anticipate from the community, and how can we best ensure clear communication to address those concerns? So these were the staff questions that we asked the Housing Recovery Board. And we had a really excellent conversation with our board members to really think through some of the considerations and really assess the trade-offs as we were looking at this potential reallocation. So next slide, Katie. And so we wanted to capture these and really summarize these today for HCD. Around a couple of themes. And so the first theme, of course, I think that we heard was the concern about the reduction in multifamily funding. And in fact, I know some written public comment that we received in advance of this meeting also indicated the same concern. So some of our housing board members voiced concerns about renters and the challenges that renters face post-Helene, especially workforce renters, and that the significant decline in the amount of multifamily development would really mean that we would have a reduced program. So concerns there. Also pointing to the fact that with the multifamily, the advantage of leveraging tax credits is present and other resources in multifamily development. And then also per unit, the amount of people we could help if we were to shift these funds over could drop significantly. So that's really just pointing to questions around how many people are going to be served by these programs, and then how do we otherwise leverage resources when the single family home repair program and its current design really has a high cost per unit overall. So appreciate those comments. The second theme that we heard was concerns around the lack of data. So we were starting to do some projections around around the home repair by the information that we have now from the state, using averages, using what we anticipate given the thresholds and the reconstruction triggers. And yet those numbers are still not final. There was also a request around, well, how do we assess the demand for multifamily, and where is that data and how is that being presented? one housing board member shared that since we don't have the RFP yet for the multifamily program, then we don't understand the trade-off of reallocating these resources. So big concerns around lack of data. Then there was also conversation just about the design of the single family program and just how that might be having some impacts here for everyone to be aware of. I think it was noted that the $50,000 threshold that triggers the reconstruction seems low, especially given the construction costs. Really just with the concept of how could that money go further if that threshold were different. I think that was the overall intent and what I heard from that comment. There were concerns about the unintended consequences of the reconstruction component of the program, really as it relates to the trade-off between the current state program, looking at a short timeline for one to stay in the home if they are indeed a recipient of the program. I think 3 years was what we found, versus when you think about multifamily, we often restrict those units for 20, 30 years of affordability. So really just thinking through perhaps unintended consequences that may result as the program. There was other strong considerations. One important point was really about homeownership and how important that is in our community, especially given that it builds generational wealth. You're seeing some of this really reflected in some of staff's earlier considerations. When we think about multifamily, we were really keen to understand the other resources that we have in our community right now to support multifamily, namely the bond program that we invested in the WNC Affordable Housing Loan Fund. We also have home ARP funds that we're trying to work towards deploying. So really just thinking about homeownership, how do we support that in our community as compared to other multifamily resources? And really to acknowledge the importance of homeownership and building generational wealth. And then that last question, I think, also opened up, questions about data and really just trying to really understand the full landscape. What other resources might we have to make up the gap in the home repair need? So again, I think it was a really good conversation, a really good and helpful feedback that we received from the Housing Recovery Board. And yes, go ahead, Council Member Turner.
You can finish your thought. I was actually just going to chime in. I agree. I virtually attended the meeting, and I was really thankful for the people in those seats and the conversations that were had and the thoughtfulness and this input. I mean, it made me really appreciate. I mean, it was their first meeting too. I was pretty impressed. So they brought up literally every concern and question I had too. So I'm glad to see this is just kind of on the table, and they weren't just like swiftly moving through things. So just to thank them.
Vice Mayor?
Remind me, maybe I'm thinking of the wrong name. Archer? Is that okay? Are they equipped to do this type of work for homeowners?
I think potentially yes. The Archer Collaborative, fortunately, was something that began pre-Helene, and then during Helene, the city was able to fund the Archer group using our 2016 bond fund. So if you think back to October 2024, right post the storm, we were able to deploy some bond funding immediately, and Archer was the entity that we contracted with to start the home repair for the storm damage right away. So when we also talk about data and looking at those other resources, we are also getting the report from Archer around how many families that they have served to date with the funding resources that the city made available. The latest that we have, and I know Sasha's working on this right now, is that we had deployed 715 immediately, and that has already served, I think, 23 homeowners with that repair need. So we have some additional funding that was allocated, and this is, again, as we're starting to really respond to these comments and really think through and coming back to HCD as well, we want to make sure that we're bringing the data that's needed. And so having that Archer data is something that we hope to bring back to create this full picture in January.
And then do we have other, I don't know, municipalities like, I'm just throwing one, Hendersonville. Anybody else who's dealt with Renew NC that could tell us um, success stories or not.
It's a great question. Yep.
I'm just, because in my mind, I'm thinking about those people who might need more than 50, but couldn't leave their homes. Is there a way we can fill in that gap? And Archer came to mind, but right. So Archer is MHO, Habitat,
Poder Emma,
okay. Just
community action. It's a collaboration effectively of a lot of local nonprofits who work in this space to do home repair.
because I keep thinking of Miss Jive's comments about generational wealth, and I feel like we don't often get the same opportunity to fund current homeowners as we do for multifamily housing, recognizing that obviously multifamily housing is dire and needed. I'm just figuring out how this can be used as another anti-displacement measure. And would it perhaps get us closest to our goal to include Archer if they're available to do something? But okay, sorry, go ahead, Nikki.
No, this is perfect because those are the type of questions that we wanted to hear from HCD so that we make sure. Actually, if you go to the next slide, Katie, I think it's our timeline. Yes. So we had shown a timeline to the Housing Recovery Board that started the public comment period in January. So based upon the Housing Recovery Board conversation and the types of questions that we saw come up, we thought it would be well served if we give a little space for, again, for these kinds of questions from HCD, so that we can really do some more due diligence as we think and contemplate all the different trade-offs, consequences, et cetera, as we consider this type of shift. And so with that, we wanted to, again, understand the questions that HCD has. So I'm trying to write down all the questions that you have and then make sure that as we come forward in January, we can continue to shape our final recommendation based upon these engagements. So go ahead. Happy to open up for all questions that we can follow up on.
Sage, you go ahead, and then I'll ask a question if you want to.
Are you sure? It's not time sensitive. So I guess one of the ideas I had about divvying up into 2 buckets is why not 3 buckets? I say that from an experience of us having gone through, well, rescue dollars and recovery dollars before. And council always, there's something will come up, and if we're trying to wrestle with how much to go to multifamily, how much to go to single family, maybe the answer is a good bit to both and some in the pot left to make decisions from. Just a suggestion. I'm thinking back of like what happened with Ramada, there were just a couple things that came up along the way that we'd always wish we had funding for. And that may happen here. We may not know what's best entirely. So just sharing that thought.
The question I had, because I can't remember which speaker brought it up in the recovery work session, but it's almost like we're pitting single family versus rental. Is it possible to move money from one of the other bigger buckets over into housing? You know, yeah, but I know this will probably go back to unmet needs or
That's the
something.
Yep, and that's the reason that I brought that up, frankly, earlier, which is that it is really challenging, and we're trying to give all of the sectors a meaningful chance for recovery. And that unmet needs assessment um, demonstrated that in the infrastructure and economic revitalization categories, we had far and away more need than what our allocation could address. So the infrastructure allocation only meets 13% of the estimated infrastructure need. The economic revitalization allocation only meets 21% of the economic recovery need, where the housing allocation at 31 million meets 93% of that estimated housing unmet need. Now, I think that your question, Vice Mayor, regarding like what is the flavor of that need? What does it look like within is a really important one. But that's the real tricky part where in those other areas, the allocation couldn't address just as much as the housing one did, if that makes sense. I don't know if showing the figures would help. Maybe we can present that in the next
Yeah, would you
step.
do that? Because I'm sure it makes sense. It's probably that I'm not getting it.
Here, let me if you don't mind, I'll share this. So if you look here at the unmet needs, there's that 1.1 billion. And in the housing, it was considered 33 million. And then of that, our program allocation is 31 million to that, where the infrastructure unmet need was 911 million, and we were only able to allocate 125 million. Same for economic recovery, 241 million in need with a $52 million allocation. So it's hard because these questions make a great deal of sense, but we're trying to ensure that we're giving those other sectors a meaningful opportunity to recover as well. So by shifting out of one of these pots, we would be further increasing the gap between the need and the allocation
And
for these other.
do we have any indication that the housing primarily considered and the unmet need was for single family?
That's the piece I would like to dig in further, because I think you're right that what I think you're asking essentially this 33 million in unmet need, how much of that would be in the single family category versus multifamily, and I think that would be really meaningful, a meaningful data point in this conversation, and I don't have that yet.
Okay, Sage or Ben. Ben, I feel like you had yours up first. Sorry, Ben.
Well, I think Councilman Turner, you were first. I just want to comment on that discussion you just had, Vice Chair, with Elma. So I'll just say real quick. So I think before council considers moving funds out of one of those other categories, such as economic recovery infrastructure, I think with a little more data, a little time, and we may be able to find that we can accomplish those housing goals with the allocation we have in place or without a significant move from another funding category. Some of what Nikki talked about, I think I'm just going to say this, I think that some of the thresholds that are part of Renew NC are also causing some of our challenges. So I would say to council that with a little more time, I think we can come back and really hone in on, are there other options to in fact make that 33 million or at least close to that meet the need we have before we have to take the step of moving money out of other DR buckets. So I think, as Elma or Nikki said, we can come back in a month or so with some more information and maybe avoid that type of decision making. Because I guess last thing, their need is so great in all categories. It's a really challenging, there's a lot to do and just not a lot of funds available.
Okay, Sage.
Does anyone know, post disaster like this, is it common for local governments to also do another round of bonds and like just tackle unmet need, just like go big and do it? And I don't say that lightly. I'm already going into a sensitive year of budget, reval, tax increases, overwhelm, et cetera, et cetera. But is that something we should be like, should that be in our periphery? I mean, we've got so much recovery along the river and potentially parks that come from land that goes through the buyout program. We've got this obvious housing void. Does anybody know?
So I don't know, and we can take a look at kind of best practices, but I would say, just food for thought, we're 3 years from our next bond cycle. So we're only 3 years away from the next bond.
I mean, some cities do them all the time. Like
Yeah,
we're not the
yeah,
same.
but I
we're
would
not a
say,
city.
I would just say, I don't know that we can spend all the money we have in the 3 years anyway.
So does
So
that mean
maybe-
that we should be taking some of the bond? I mean, do we need to be looking at the bond money differently then?
Nikki's team is definitely looking at how to utilize the $20 million in bond money that we have, in addition to the $31 million in DR money. So that's over $50 million of housing funds.
Well,
I'm
here's
not
the
sure-
thing,
I
this
don't know that that can be spent in 3 years,
well, I mean, yeah.
but I do know in 3 years, it may be a good opportunity to consider another housing bond and kind of keep that momentum moving. So it's just kind
I
of
mean,
what.
I know we're trying to get into a greater bond cycle. It just begs the question, like, how are we really solving this problem? You know, and it's maybe I just needed to say it. Like, is this something that should be on the table? I'll leave it at that.
Are we at the,
Nikki, I'm sorry, my mouth's asked Nikki, do you have any thoughts on that question for Councilman Turner, or just in terms of where we're at and then what the next couple of years look like?
No, I mean, I think again, what's helpful is that really understanding the funding landscape for all program types is something that we'll bring back to HCD in January, so that we can just demonstrate where we are in all of these programs and really start to clarify those pathways. So and then have that for consideration. I think Katie, if you can go to the next slide. Because I think we're right where we're on our target. I mean, so again, I think what we're here is really wanting to hear all these questions, write them down, reflect more on, again, our conversation with the Housing Recovery Board. We will have more data from the state in January, and then wanting to come back with more information. So this has been helpful for me. I think the other thing to understand is that we have been working on the multifamily program of the CDBG-DR, and we're hoping to provide an update on the status of that program sometime in January. I mean, we had set our sights on issuing a notice of funding opportunity as quickly as we could, given these funding constraints that we're hearing from the state. We did have to take a minute to really understand what our strategy would be with that. But again, we're trying to pick that back up with all the considerations that we've heard here. So we're going to include that as part of our update to HCD in January as well, in terms of exact status, where we are with that multifamily notice of funding opportunity, and be able to report out then on that as well.
I see that it says you'll be returning to us in January in recovery. When do you anticipate asking us to vote on something?
I think if you can go back 2 slides, Katie, I think that we want to allow that conversation on February 4th, sorry, to the timeline. And then
I see.
HCD vote in March.
Okay.
Because because this really reflects, so to do a substantial amendment requires that public comment period to open. And then that's a 30-day public comment period. And really then allowing that also to have all those comments completed by the time that HCD would take action. So just again, allowing more time for engagement with our Housing Recovery Board, and then hopefully getting to the place where we have a lot of the final data from the state to really help us to make the best decisions.
Okay. Council, do we have any more questions for Nikki or Alma on this? Are we at the end of your presentation?
We are.
Sage?
Actually, Vice Mayor, I would like to talk about something entirely different. I just don't want to miss the opportunity before public comment. So just let me know when that's an available minute.
No more questions on this part, though.
I have a question. It's more like a comment. I would like more information, follow-up data on the inactive applicants, so we can see why they chose not to participate. And if we discover that it is because they don't have the resources to relocate temporarily, then I'm wondering if we can figure out, if we can find some temporary housing options or partners for those individuals, because I don't know what the condition of their home is, if it's going to impact their quality of life or health issues. But I think we need to follow up to figure out what's the nature of them pulling out.
That's well noted. Maybe I'll just quickly recap the questions I know we should follow up on, particularly the reason for the inactive applications, why they chose not to participate, asking about other communities' experience with Renew NC, what happens when projects exceed that 450K, what the avenues are after that, and then additional data from our unmet needs assessment regarding the single family need versus the multifamily need, which I do have, but I think it might be a little data heavy, so we can provide it in a little bit more of a concise way.
Okay.
Is there anything that I missed?
I can't think of anything else that we asked. Sage, is your question for this, or is this still the hand raised for the other thing? Well, okay. Nikki, were you getting ready to say something?
I had one more, and this I think is so important to our community. How can we use this opportunity as anti-displacement? So I wanted to voice that because I believe I heard that as well. So wanting to make sure that we have that one as a follow-up.
Oh, and sorry, one more, which I think Councilwoman Turner mentioned about the possible avenue of another round of bonds, just continuing to explore that. Sounds important as well. Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. This has been informative, and looking forward to hearing more about this in our January meeting. Can you believe it's the end of the year? I can't believe this. Okay, thanks for this one. But before we move on to public comment, Sage, you had something.
Just briefly, I wanted to kind of pick up on some of the momentum we had at the last council meeting around missing middle initiatives, protecting legacy neighborhoods, moving on some things. And I know we have PED today later as well. And I think maybe talking about that a little bit, but I'm wondering if HCD wants to pick up some of the stuff that we had queued up, I guess, early on in the missing middle process. We had, there was a kind of a myriad of things that were being looked at, and we've kind of shelved everything while we figured out how to process and protect legacy neighborhoods. But we've since been able to, as a council, several times be like, we just know we want to protect them. We have these maps. We did the cottage cluster. We did the corridors. Like, we have some areas. I'm wondering if we want to try and take some momentum and maybe have conversations around what that LNC process looks like, or what it looks like to continue on with some of the other things in the rest of the city.
So I'd love to respond to that.
Yeah.
So I believe our goal was to perhaps have Sekou come to us in our next HCD meeting to discuss, I believe it was like 6 points or something. I have to go back to the email that he sent. But I want to push back a little bit to say that we shelved some of these things while we were working with legacy neighborhoods. My understanding is that staff requested that no changes be made because the goal was to do a broader study. So legacy
Like
neighborhoods
EO.
are separate and apart. So I don't want word to get out that legacy neighborhoods are stopping this. So
No.
the
If
reason,
anything, we were.
yeah, the reason even the ADU issue did not move forward is because staff removed it.
Right. And that's something in itself, right? Like, if we as council are feeling the urgency to continue to push other housing things forward, then let's voice that to staff, right? Let's say, okay, yes, we do want the ADUs, bring it back, or, whatever that is, if we have support for that. I just don't want some of the things to not happen. I mean, much like we were just talking about in recovery and housing, after such a natural disaster, we have to make concerted efforts to revive the community, which we're doing via these programs that are coming to us. But what are we doing as a council? Are we saying, like, come build here, come bring jobs here, come renew, come bring new business? How are we doing that? And I think adopting some things throughout the rest of the city is a mechanism of such. So, I don't want us to cause problems that last for 5 years. So I'd love for us to take some movement. If Sekou and LNC want to come in January, that's great. I'd love for maybe staff to be considering, or I don't know how I guess I can call fellow council members and just say, hey, is there momentum? But I'd love to see us pick up some of these missing middle initiatives again. That's really it.
So we'll plan to move forward, I guess, if it's the majority, with something from the legacy neighborhoods in our next meeting and then take it from there. Is that okay with everybody? Okay. Okay, so with that being said, we'll move forward to item number 3 on our agenda, which is public comment. Katie, do we have any speakers in the queue?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do. We have one speaker as of now.
Okay.
Just one moment. Caller ending in 2130. Your line is now open and you will have 3 minutes to speak.
Hey folks, David Greenson here from People's Place, Gap ABL. Really appreciating this conversation and the questions that are coming up, which I think are really crucial questions. So thank you to the council members and to staff. Just wanted to add a few additional questions or double down on some in terms of collecting data, which I think is super crucial for y'all. I'm wondering in particular about the multifamily unmet needs. It was very much acknowledged in the action plan that the multifamily unmet needs are really hard to calculate for CDBG-DR. They're less precise. They rely on proxy measures, likely really undercount the actual needs. So I'm just wondering whether staff is going to be going back, because now, that those original unmet needs were calculated at the beginning of the year. There probably is more detailed, FEMA information. There's insurance claims data. There's probably more building inspection data. There's obviously our updated homelessness and displacement data, and the post-market housing market data. There's a lot of different pieces that could be put to the puzzle that would help us get a more accurate sense of the unmet need for multifamily, which would help inform this process and decision making. Also, just really want to double down on checking with other municipalities. I've had some conversations with folks in the county manager's office in Hendersonville, and Henderson County is really having a hard time getting good information from a new entity about timelines, about how certain problems are going to be addressed. They're really finding it challenging. And before we commit a whole bunch of our money to Renew NC, I feel like you all are really kicking the tires, but I would talk to some of these other counties and see what their experience is. And then finally, the limited data that you said, there's demand data now on unmet needs for home repair, because a lot of folks really wanting that, and that's a really valid need. And as you acknowledge, we don't know what the multifamily demand is. And I'm just curious what data collection we're going to do around that. How are we going to assess the multifamily need? Because as the Housing Recovery Board pointed out, we'd like to be able to have both of those, stories in our site, the unmet need for single family as well as multifamily. So how can we gather more information about the multifamily demand? That's all. Thanks so much, everyone.
Katie, is that the last call?
One moment, let me just reload the site and make sure we do not have anyone else in the queue.
In the interim, I'd go ahead and say I appreciated David's questions, and to the extent that you can get answers for any of those, I would be very appreciative.
That was our only caller. No one else is in the queue.
Okay, council, since there are no more calls, I think it's time, and it's okay for us to adjourn the meeting unless there are any other questions or comments. Okay, great meeting. Have a good rest of your day, everyone. Bye-bye.